Hey everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be doing a video on the full history of the US cent coin, specifically focusing on a lot of the earlier ones and how they came to be. We also have things like values along the way, but for the full picture on that coin and how it's evolved over the years, let's start the presentation. And here's the very first coin that we'll be going over, and that is the 1793 flowing hair chain cent. This coin was the very first cent made by the US government and was the first mass production coin in any metal that the federal government produced with its own machinery and with its own building. There was a 1792 dime that was produced before it. But the unbounded hair over here is something interesting about the coin. It was supposed to symbolize freedom and liberty, but instead people thought that it was like savagery and madness and that the person was kind of unbridled. So the coin was criticized in that respect, and then the chain was supposed to be something symbolizing strength, but instead people thought that it was associated with slavery and also complained about that. So the 1/100th fraction was commitment to the decimal system, because at that time they were breaking away from the British pound sterling system, which was not out of 100. And then they also wanted to be aware of people who were not literate. That was a big problem at the time, but a lot of people would still be able to recognize some numbers. So the 1/100 was preferred there. In terms of some of the values, I'll go over, and throughout the presentation, they may not always be great values in the sense that they're for a regular coin, but here all of them are rare, so the approximate values are still pretty high. Very circulated refers to a coin that is like a good 4 or an about good 3. So often that's better than the type of culls that you might see in a coin shop, but a very circulated one is going to be $5,000. Light circulation is what I'll call an XF40 coin or EF40, where there's a little bit of wear, but it's still really nice details. That's a $50,000 coin on this one. And then uncirculated, I try to stay with 65, but here for 65s, there were 3 different varieties. One where it says Ameri, one where it's America, and one where there is a period after Liberty and 1793. They all kind of range in this range that I'm discussing, but the prices paid, the highest is around 1.5 million for a 64 plus mint state coin of the Ameri variety that we see here. Next up, we have the 1793 flowing hair wreath cent. So as you can see, the bust is a little bit more refined, while there's some nice details on the back that make it a little bit better. The 1/100 is shifted down. They remove the chain, and it's just a better, crisper coin. And it answers the criticisms. But the interesting thing is that it's tough to figure out what plant is on the back here. There's 3 different ones. There's the vine and bars edge, lettered edge, and then the strawberry leaf, which is more obvious. I don't have a photo of the strawberry leaf one, but that one is far more rare. And the interesting thing about this series is that there were a few times when the mint's rolling mills broke down and they produced a lot less coinage then. Today, about 2,400 to 2,800 of them are surviving, while there were 63,000 originally made. 30 of those remain in mint state today. In terms of the circulated values, these are for the vine and bars or lettered edge. It's about 2,000 when it's pretty circulated, 20K for light circulation, and 300,000 for the uncirculated one. There's one mint state 69 vine and bars edge that sold for 550,000. And then for the strawberry leaf, the coin, when it's found in a about good 2 or poor 2, it was sold for 250,000. And then the best known example is Fine 12, and that sold for a little bit under 900,000. So definitely a lot more valuable, and the coins are in a lot worse condition. In 1793, we then moved to the Liberty cap with a beaded border. That's our third version of these coins, and it shows a young Liberty with the cap here, which was something that was given to freed slaves, so that's also Liberty. One interesting thing is these emblems continually resurfacing of Liberty are mandated by the federal government to be on all of these coins, so that's the commitment to that design. The coin weighs 208 grains, which was the weight specified, but they cut that to 168 in 1796, so a little bit later. The 1793 coins, though, are a lot rarer than some of the other ones. And these coins are worth about $8,000 in circulated, or very circulated, $100,000 for light circulation. And there was one known in Mint State 64, but the sales for these are on ones that are a lot less good condition, so there's an estimate of $2 million. Then the Liberty cap, it's slightly revised, especially with this Denticled border from 1794 to 1796. And there's a ton of varieties on these coins outside of the fact that they switched around the border. So a lot of people will focus, since they're still pretty expensive, on the different varieties within a specific date. And these coins, the prices drop quite a bit, about $200 for really circulated ones, $3,500 for an XF40, and about $100,000 for a really well-preserved mint state coin. Now, the early coins in U.S. coin history, especially with these cents, had a ton of different varieties and craziness, and this was definitely the case on this series, which was the 1796 to 1807 Draped bust cent, and the obverse was started by being paired with 3 different reverses, so different reverse dies that all had different characteristics, but there would be tons of different pairings, overdates, large and small date varieties, hairstyles, die breaks. You can see something going on right there, and tons of other ones. There was one error where they made it 1/000 instead of 100. And then one crazy one was a private restrike that had an 1804 obverse, but a reverse from 1820. So that's kind of a testament to the practice of restriking. People would often get them and strike older coins. It was a collector thing. Now those coins are viewed as very rare and valuable, but would definitely be crazy if people were doing that today. It doesn't happen today. And the mint state fines are still pretty elusive. So an $80 figure is what you can expect to pay for a circulated, but still, decent, uncleaned, or no really awful wear on it. $1,500 for XF40, and then $40K for an uncirculated example. As we move along here, they really change the head of the coin, and they get the name Classic Head. 1808 to 1814 were when these were made, and they continued with the tons of different varieties. But before I get into that, I do want to say, people say that the planchet quality was pretty poor on these, so the metal was not really constructed well. Some of the varieties here are going to be 1810 over 09. There's an 1811 where the 1 is punched over a 0. There's a small and large date 1812 one, and then there's plain or cross-slit 4s, which is where there's a little dot where the 4, it's kind of tough to explain without showing it, but a cross-slit 4. 1815, there was a big fire at the mint and no coins were made, and when they came back, it would be a different one, so that marked the end of these designed cents. And then the values, while they're below, it's $100 for really circulated ones, $2,000 for lightly circulated, and $100,000, for uncirculated. So a little bit higher prices there. There's not too many key dates in this classic head set. Next up, we have the larger series, and by this time the prices start dropping. 1816 to 1839 Coronet head cent. Again, there are some more rare dates like 1823, for example, but the coins are pretty unremarkable, and there's a lot of different varieties. One of the standout coins is a proof-only coin. There are a few of those, as well as a lot of different private restrikes, specifically one that was actually made out of silver, so that was pretty crazy. But the average values on these are going to be $25 for the real circulated ones, $125 when there's some decent detail on it, and $2,000 for the uncirculated copies. The last of the really large cents, we have the 1839 to 1857 braided hair cent next. And these coins were pretty neat. They had a small difference in the sense that they braided the hair instead, and the shape of the hair, if you look back, is slightly different. But the individual die differences on these, before they were a lot more easy to detect, but people really put a lot of effort. It's microscopic differences, but they still are there, and researchers were able to identify them. but the general date sets, when you don't focus on all of these specifics, are a lot more easy to complete. There are still a lot of varieties. There's a 1839 over 6, there's a 1851 over 81, and there's a 1855 knob on ear coin. So there's a few, those are some of the few to look for. But as copper prices increased and other general costs increase in terms of making these coins, they get too expensive to produce and they phase them out in favor of coins that are significantly smaller. And today these bring about $15 for real circulated ones, $60, and then $600 in uncirculated. Now these cents are the 1856 to 1858 Flying Eagle ones, are way smaller, and they're a response to the unaccepted large cents that the mint was striking. People were literally not taking them. They weren't considered legal tender. And this coin is 4.67 grams as opposed to 10.89 grams, which was the old one. And the mint director in 1856 gets 1,000 cents struck without authorization, meaning that technically today the Secret Service could seize the coins if they wanted to. But they were a lot more rare than the 57 and 58. And the restrikes of the 1856 for collectors were also done in 58 and 59. But some of the interesting varieties, there's a small and large letters variety for the 1858. There's not much of a difference in value, but there is a good 1858 over 7 that people look for on the regular one that's more. The small cent is also not legal tender, so a lot of them were rejected by the bankers and the merchants. That soon would change about 10 years later. And nobody really knows the reason that they switched out of the Flying Eagle. But the 1856, that's going to be like a 10,000 circulated, 60,000 uncirculated, high value coin, whereas the circulated 1857, 1858 are only $20, light circulation $100, and then the uncs are about $3,000. They then shift to a very popular design that would go on for a long time. There's 3 main varieties here. The first being the no shield, so it just says 1 cent and this wreath on the back, as well as a Native American on the front. The values are below $10, circulated $80 for XF40, $2K for Mint State 65. They then changed that by adding a shield here. I think it's a more elegant wreath, and then they continue to have it in copper nickel, but they really add that shield and change mostly the back of the coin. And the coins are often called white cents because they're a more pale color, and they're significantly more thick than the later Indian head cents, as well as the Civil War tokens being made due to shortage of 1 cent coins at the time. These coins are $10, circulated $50 for XF, and $1,000 for uncirculated. So we slowly see the prices really declining here. And then on the 1864 to 1909, they shift to bronze. They make them smaller in terms of thickness. And then what happened was that the Civil War tokens were circulated, but unofficial and not even legal tender. So it showed that the coins didn't necessarily need intrinsic value to be traded. So the mint realizes they can profit from making these smaller coins, and that's what they do. Some of the key dates on this include 1877, 1908S, and 1909S, as well as a lot of the 60s and 70s dates. And some of the varieties are the 1864L, 1873 Double Liberty, 1888 over 7 over date, that's really valuable, and then an 1894 double date. Now, these are for the average Indian head cent, the values, and those are pretty low. $1 for a circulated one, $10 for a better detail, and $100 for uncirculated. Now, in 1909, they commemorate Abraham Lincoln on his 100th birthday, and they make these wheat ear. You can see the wheat over here, and these are made at P, D, and S, so first Denver Mint coins. They also, I believe, are the first to feature an American president, so that's kind of interesting. But as we can see below, the key dates are the 09S, 09S VDB, 1914D, 1922, and 1931S, while the errors are double dies found on the 1917, 1936, and 1955, with the 1955 probably being the most famous of them. The coins, though, are not too valuable if they're not a special date. We're talking about 3 to 10 cents for the circulated ones and $20 for unk on a regular 40s or 50s date. However, there was one year where the composition shifted significantly, and I have a full video on it in another one, but it's a steel cent made of steel and zinc, to try to conserve copper for the war effort. Now, the coin was made for 1 year and had a ton of different errors that I actually covered in a different video, but the coins often oxidized quickly in circulation. They didn't do great, but you might hear about some bronze 1943s that can be worth a ton. A lot of newer people think that these are worth a lot. They're actually not that valuable, probably 10 cents for circulated ones, $1 for a one with a lot of detail, and then 30 for the uncirculated. So definitely not, a lot of people think they have some crazy silver penny. It's really not going to be worth a ton. Then we get to today's circulating ones. At this point, there's not really any value for uncirculated mint state 65. On most of these, the error is something good to look for. Here's an error where there's the doubled ear on the 1984, but some of the ones to look for are the 1969S double die, 1972 double die, 1982 wrong planchet, 1983 double die reverse, 1984 double die obverse, which is really just a doubled ear. Then there's a 1990 no S proof coin. It's not just regular 1990s. It's got to be proof where they left the S off. I have a video on that as well. And then finally, 1995 double die obverse is one that's also more common to find. But those are just those, and you can see how they shift to the memorial with Lincoln standing or sitting in the memorial. So he's featured twice on both sides of the coin, technically. Then in 2009, for his 200th anniversary of being born, they make these Bicentennial coins where there's reverses. There are some small errors, but they're not super valuable, and they include his birth and early childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. The last, and what we have today, is the 2010 to present Lincoln Shield cent. This is supposed to symbolize the preservation of the U.S. as a single and united country, with 13 stripes in the shield representing the 13 original states. And this shield was the Union shield. It was used and referenced in the Civil War. So that also pays testament to him as well. That concludes our overview of the full evolution of the cent. Hope you have a much better picture of our history in that department, and I hope that you enjoyed the video.
Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with me, do so on my website, treasuretownYT.com, my Instagram, TreasureTownYT, or my Facebook, TreasureTown. I've got links in the description, and I'll see you on some of my other videos.